Hello, America, FBI and CIA agents, and fellow cult members. Welcome to Culture Club USA. I'm DiBRAVA. In today's episode of Crime and Culture Unfiltered, a former Miss Switzerland pageant contestant meets a ghastly and gruesome demise at the hands of what is seemingly the usual suspect. But why? Let's dive in.
An international model, once a finalist in the Miss Switzerland pageant, is strangled to death, dismembered with a jigsaw, and then allegedly pureed in a blender. And prosecutors say they already know who did it: her husband. This is the story of 38-year-old Krystyna Jaksimowicz and the case against her husband and the father of her two kids.
Did they say pureed in a blender? No. Is this some kind of joke? Somebody pureed her in a blender? Oh my God, this is going to get ugly.
Krystyna's story takes us to Switzerland, where she lived and worked as a model and later a coach. In 2003, she won the Miss Northwest Switzerland pageant, and by 2008, she was a finalist in the Miss Switzerland competition. She later founded her own business called Catwalk Coach, where she transitioned to a coaching role and mentored aspiring young models.
My name is Krystyna, the Catwalk Coach, and I'm preparing Natalie for her big show. Let's start with the first pose. If you want to look confident and sexy, take a step aside, turn, and lean back slightly. If you're wearing a dress, take one step ahead, lean back to highlight your leg.
As her career took off, so too did her personal life, and in
Wow, that's how it's done, huh? First of all. Interesting. Okay, I mean, hey, she looks good at what she's doing, for the pageant world, you know what I mean? She's definitely a professional here.
As her career took off, so too did her personal life, and in 2017, Krystyna got married. Her husband is this guy, who's only being identified as Thomas in news outlets. Together, Krystyna and Thomas—
What? Who's only being identified as Thomas in news outlets? What does that mean? Is he not arrested? I mean, what does that even mean? Supposedly she's been pureed in a blender and okay, we'll see.
Together, Krystyna and Thomas shared two daughters. They lived in Benningen, Switzerland, a relatively small municipality.
Okay, they were living in Switzerland. Another country, another set of laws. American rules don't apply. Not that they apply here right now, but I'm just saying.
Relatively small municipality just outside the larger city of Basel. All this is in the northwest corner of Switzerland, not far from the French or German borders. And it was this same location, the family home in Benningen, where Krystyna was brutally murdered. Her body was found on February 13th, and right away, Swiss investigators knew her death was grisly. Here's a warning: the next description is pretty graphic. Detectives were able to determine that Krystyna had been strangled to death, and after that, her body was dismembered. They say the suspect used multiple items to cut up her body, including a knife, garden shears, and even a jigsaw.
What happened here? Okay, because something happened, something seriously emotionally disturbing to whatever man did this to her happened between. This is not this is a crime, in my opinion. It seems like obviously someone knew it. You don't just dismember. But I mean, this is, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm just saying, this is the feeling I'm getting. That's barbaric.
If that wasn't enough, the suspect later took pieces of Krystyna's body and ground them up with a hand blender. According to court documents,
I just can't get past that. What kind of hand blender? You ground up? I mean, this is like something out of a movie. Is this even possible to do? You're grinding up pieces of an actual human body in a blender? Is that even possible?
She was pureed, and the remains were left in a chemical solution to dissolve. One day after Christina's remains were discovered, Thomas was arrested. Right away, he told investigators an interesting story, that he'd found Christina dead in their home back in January and then panicked. Instead of calling police, he said he decided to cut up the body in their laundry room.
Could you imagine? Just imagine this. Are you insane? Do you think anybody believes that? So you walk into your home and find your wife dead, and you panic and decide to dismember her? Do you know how insane that is? To even think to come up with a story like that for the police? You didn't kill her, though. Really? Okay, this is outrageous.
Room. It's important to note that both medical investigators and crime scene techs determined that the facts in Thomas's confession didn't quite add up. But that was just his initial story. In March, Thomas changed his tune, saying he killed Christina, but it was out of self-defense because she was coming at him and he feared for his life. Thomas says Christina had previously attacked him with a knife, but others say it was Thomas who had a history of attacking Christina. As investigators dug more into the couple's past, witnesses revealed they'd seen Thomas violently push Christina up against a wall, holding her by her neck. He'd apparently strangled her in the past, too. So Thomas has been in custody since his arrest, but he did appeal for release just this Wednesday. A federal court later denied that request.
Okay, this is like, this is so bad because you have to understand, it's bad enough that this woman is dead, okay? I don't care what you've done, okay? Nobody deserves that, right? There are children involved here. There are 2 small children involved here. So he admitted now that he killed his wife, and now it's in self-defense. But prior to that, you panicked and found her dead and then decided to dismember her body and put her in a blender. These children have very little chance here. Very, very sad. It's very, very sad.
But during the court hearing, we learned more gruesome details about Christina's murder and Thomas's state of mind. Officials say he showed a, quote, noticeably high level of criminal energy, lack of empathy, and cold-bloodedness after killing his wife. They also said he showed a, quote, conspicuously high level of criminal energy in an assessment, but also that there are concrete indications of mental illness. There are so many layers.
Oh my God. Okay. Choose your mate wisely. This is obviously a very disturbed man. Clearly. I mean, he killed his wife, first of all. You have to be disturbed to do that to begin with. Okay. Because, I mean, did you get a look at the size of her? I mean, she's like this big. What could she possibly be doing that you couldn't just like grab her and stop her from? You know what I'm saying? She's like practically anorexic here. I mean, what are we talking about? You're telling me that she has the strength to physically do something to you? To the point where in self-defense you have to kill her to save your own life? No.
Illness. There are so many layers to this disturbing case. So we sat down with attorney Jennifer Roman to try and make sense of the crime. We know that the victim here, Christina, had been strangled, and just that alone is terrifying and disturbing. And the fact that it's such an intimate way to die, it doesn't happen instantaneously. Does that add at all to the defendant in this case? The fact that he chose to strangle rather than shoot or stab?
This was a very intimate crime. And to the extent that the defendant is going to be claiming maybe not guilty by reason of insanity or try to allege that he had some mental health issues that might mitigate what he's accused of doing, the fact that she died by strangulation is going to completely negate any of that.
Wow, that's interesting. Huh. So what she's saying is that he's trying to claim that he's insane. He wants an insanity plea. But the fact that he strangled her is going to debunk that. Huh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I wonder why. Because somebody that's insane, what they don't, they're not capable of causing physical harm. Like how does that work? Like, I'm just curious to see where that's going.
Going to completely negate any of that. And that's simply because when we think about when people are successful with being found not guilty by reason of insanity, first of all, it's really rare that somebody's successful with that defense. But second of all, we tend to think that when somebody's had a period of time to premeditate it, or that a crime took a significantly long period of time, so strangling somebody to death is not instantaneous, then...
Oh, interesting. Wow. So it takes a lot of effort and like it's time consuming in a way to strangle someone. So, ooh, this is interesting. This is interesting.
Long period of time. So strangling somebody to death is not instantaneous. Then cutting up their body is not instantaneous. Then taking the body parts and putting them in a blender. All of that takes time and takes a certain level of cognition. And
yes, but a lot of insane people are highly intelligent. How does that debunk that? I'm just curious here. If you're insane, a lot of insane people are masterminds at a lot of weird things. So because strangulation takes time, and then he took the time to cut her body up and dispose of it in some sort of fashion in a blender, is what they're saying, allegedly. That makes him not insane? It actually makes him pretty insane to me. It takes a pretty insane person to do all of that. I'm really curious to see what the logic here is.
Of cognition and ability to execute on some really disgusting and horrible actions. And all of those factors, from a jury's perspective, are going to say to the jury, he's not guilty by reason of insanity, because if he had a moment of insanity at any point along that multiple hour commission of the crime, he could have stopped. And he could have, and then after the fact, when his initial interview with the police, he says, well, I killed her, but it was in self-defense. Again, that shows an awareness of right and wrong. That mitigates and eliminates a not guilty by reason of insanity defense. So the nature of the crime.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so, he didn't think out what his statements were going to be. He didn't think out how it was going to affect the case. But I still don't understand how that doesn't make him insane. I still don't get that. Think about it. It's like the movie Psycho. He took a lot of time to plan how to kill his own mother and where. I mean, does that mean he's not insane? This doesn't make any sense.
Not guilty by reason of insanity defense. So the nature of the crime, to the extent that he's going to claim not guilty by reason of insanity, which there are some intimations that might be what he plans on alleging, to the extent that he does allege that, the facts don't support it, and the likelihood of success for him on a not guilty by reason of insanity defense are probably little to none.
I mean, you brought up a really good point. The strangulation itself is terrifying and just terrible that we even have to talk about. But this defendant took it to another level in dismembering the body in such a gruesome way. And unfortunately, this is a type of story I've covered before. It's not super common, but I have seen dismemberment stories. However, I've never seen a story where they use a jigsaw. To me, that sounds almost like the movie Saw, and then a blender. So, I mean, dismembering a body is just terrible unto itself. But I almost feel like that, what he chose to use, brings it to another level of grotesque. What do you think?
To me, this is like beyond grotesque. And I think, yes, we've seen dismemberment cases before. We have the Brian Walsh case in Massachusetts right now, where he's accused of killing and dismembering his wife.
What is going on? I mean, what is going on to the point where men are just killing and dismembering their wives? See, I think that culture has a lot to do with it. You know what I'm saying here? Culture has a lot to do with it, okay? First of all, obviously there's some serious jealousy going on here, all right? If your wife is like doing these videos and she's a pageant contestant and she's teaching people how to be pageant contestants now, all these photo shoots, you know, it takes a certain kind of personality and demeanor when it comes to a man being with a female that is in this industry, okay? You have to have a certain kind of temperament, and jealousy is not part of that. That's number one. Number two, you have also these generations of women who think that they're all models, they're all pageant contestants, they're all this. So they're doing all of this stuff on Instagram, and it's like almost disrespectful in a way, you know, to your family, to whoever. Like, obviously this is her job, so this is a totally different circumstance here, but women are out of control. And it could drive a man nuts. Think about it, and vice versa. If you think about it, if you think about this, there's no way that you can tell me that culture doesn't have anything to do with this crime. Him looking at her doing this, looking at the provoke, he can't take it, obviously. There's a crazy jealousy going on here, a possessiveness, an obsession. It's dangerous. Clearly, because she's no longer with us.
But when you start to take it to the nature of the tools that were used, which is not going to be quick by any stretch of the imagination, and then you take it to the next level of physically moving those body parts, not disposing of them, but putting them into a blender, pureeing them with chemicals, there's a lot of intent and premeditation that goes into that it just speaks volumes about the nature of the crime, that the level of hostility, which seems like not a strong enough word for what happened here.
Well, it's jealousy. Think about it. These are real. Think about the tools he's using: saws, you know, blenders. Like, you're taking the time to like dismember her body into. Think about it. You're talking about a blender here, a blender. Even an industrial blender that you get, you know, at Pressed Juicery, your Vitamix, is only going to fit so much. You know how many times you'd have to blend a body? I mean, he is clearly jealous. He hates her and loves her at the same time. This is a severe crime of passion. What drove him to that?
It really is incredibly violent and feels incredibly invasive on a lot of levels.
You brought up a good point in all of that. So after he first strangles his wife, allegedly at this point, then cuts up her body and puts her in a blender, at the very end of all this, he puts the remains in a chemical solution, which to me gets thinking consciousness of guilt. Maybe at this point...
You know how difficult it is to even blend a protein shake sometimes, even with a Vitamix? The frozen strawberries? Imagine doing this with flesh! This is sick.
Trying to cover up his tracks. What do you think about that part?
Yes, there's definitely evidence of consciousness of guilt. It starts with his initial reports to the police where he says she had tried to attack me with a knife. I acted in self-defense, and then I panicked, so I dismembered her body. So it starts there, where he's setting it up as I dismembered her. I didn't kill her. I killed her in self-defense, but then I sort of panicked. Then it goes on to the level of dismemberment, which is another level of concealment, and then a third level of concealment of trying to grind up those body parts and dissolve them in some sort of a chemical solution. So there are multiple levels of him attempting to conceal this alleged crime.
And you keep bringing up something really important in this case, the fact that he confessed to the crime. But there's kind of a couple of layers that have to do with it. At first, when her body's found back in February, he says, I found her dead.
What a shame, first of all. This is really just sickening. This is, it's like, look at our society today, people. It's like we're at the point where humanity has absolutely no value. None. To the point where you can have a president at a debate that was literally shot in the head, and there's no speaking of it. There's just nothing. It's like, who cares? He deserved to die. Oh, nothing. It doesn't matter. Like, even if it was the other side, okay, this is not okay. These incidences that are happening in our culture and society today are not okay. People are not in a good mental place. We have lost our way. And a lot of this has to do with separating people from people. If you're living on the internet and the most important thing when you're at dinner with your family or on a date or with your wife or your girlfriend or your spouse or a friend that you're sitting across from, if the most important thing during that dinner is being on your phone, you've lost your way. You've lost your way. Kids today, they don't want to interact with their grandparents that won't be here very long. They have no respect. It's a very strange place we're in this world. It's going to take God to do something very drastic for this to change. This is crazy. Who does something like this? I mean, get a divorce. Find a newer, younger girl. You have to dismember the mother of your children?
I found her dead in January. She already had died, and then I cut up the body. So he's only claiming he cut up the body. Then later, what you pointed out, he says that it was in self-defense, that she was coming at him, so he killed her with the knife. I mean, do either of these things hold up? The fact that he confessed in some way twice, is this something that's really strong for the prosecution?
The nature of the confession, both of them are particularly compelling for the prosecution, assuming that they were obtained in a legal manner and he was availed of his rights and what have you. But the nature of the confessions themselves, either one of them are compelling. I think what becomes an extra sword for the prosecution, so to speak, is that he confessed twice and changed his story. The changing of the story goes back to that idea of attempting to conceal a crime, or a consciousness of guilt, which, again, if there's an allegation of mental health issues with him that caused him to do this rather than his own right mind, that's going to negate those claims by the defense as well. So there's multiple ways that the prosecution can use these alleged confessions from him. They can use it as part of their case in chief, and they can also use it to rebut or refute anything that the defense tries to put out there to suggest that either it was a crime of passion or it was due to some type of temporary insanity where he didn't understand right from wrong.
The detail,
again, they're talking about temporary insanity where he may or may not have understood right from wrong. It's like, do you notice what trend is happening in the last few years? Everything is mental health. Everybody has a mental health problem. Well, why? First of all, how is that possible? Okay. Secondly, a lot of it is an excuse. Thirdly, if you're addicted to your phone, if you're addicted to Instagram and TikTok, couldn't that make you a bit insane? I mean, we're basically living in a metaverse. It's called our phone. It's crazy.
There's also a major point the prosecution will want to hit on: Thomas's alleged past history with domestic violence. If we're taking a look at the second confession, the one where he said it was self-defense, what's interesting to me about this is there had been prior reports of him being aggressive with her. I guess a different witness had said he saw the husband take Christina, put her up against the wall, kind of strangle her in front of multiple people. That gets me thinking about prior bad acts. So what would it take to include that in the case in chief when it comes time for trial?
So this is a little bit technical because I don't know.
Now, this is typical. okay, for a man that killed his wife to say she was abusive. Now, because we've all seen that there are many, many cases of women being extremely abusive to men, right? But you killed your wife. You killed her. Okay, so there's nobody here to speak on her behalf, and your children are too small. So, yeah, this is going in a very bad direction for him and his future. I'm going to say his future is jail and jail only.
So this is a little bit technical because I don't know what Switzerland's rules of evidence are in terms of admitting the admission of prior bad acts. But in a situation in the United States, a defendant's prior bad acts may be admitted into evidence if the court finds that they are instructive but not unduly prejudicial to the defendant. So the fact that other people saw him demonstrate violence towards the victim it is going to be compelling evidence. And the fact that the nature of the alleged violence, the banging her head, strangulation, is very similar to what he's accused of doing now, is going to become a balancing test, right? I think that a fact finder does need to hear that there was a pattern of physical abuse or allegations of physical abuse. In fact, there are claims that the police had been called to the house before to investigate allegations of domestic violence. So this wasn't an isolated incident. And so certainly the prosecution is going to push really hard to have that testimony come in and to have prior bad acts come in to show a pattern, to show that this was escalating, that this was very much intentional and premeditated and not the result of a crime of passion.
It would be shocking if they didn't allow that, actually. It would be shocking. I mean, I guess these countries, they do, every country deals with something differently, but I mean, a woman was dismembered and she was strangled, and he admitted that he killed her. And he also admitted that he dismembered her. I mean, I would say it's a free-for-all now. Anything that you got on him is going into court. I mean, this is insane. I just feel sick for these kids. They have no chance.
Or to refute a self-defense claim, that the defense might try to raise in this case. So they're definitely going to push to get it in. I think the question is, what do the rules of evidence allow for in Switzerland courts? Certainly here it could be admissible.
We've talked about what led up to the murder, these prior bad acts, then the gruesome details of the murder, but now I want to focus on what happened afterward. So we talk about these multiple confessions, but additionally, according to the reports I've seen, some of the investigators said he completely lacked empathy. I mean, he's talking in both confessions about chopping up his wife and doesn't have any empathy about what he's done.
Wow. So in the confessions, he's talking about dismembering his own wife after admitting that he killed her with no empathy. That is scary. That is scary. That's a psychopath, okay? That is a psychopath or a sociopath, one of the two.
Confessed to. Additionally, I've seen some reports that say he had sadistic or sociopathic traits, that he was kind of expressing all of those things. So is his reaction at the end of this crime, let's say after he's been taken into custody, does any of that matter in terms of the trial?
Certainly investigators are going to be able to testify as to his demeanor and to how he presented, their observations of him when they were questioning him, when he was making these alleged confessions. It's all going to be relevant to his state of mind.
Isn't it all on tape? Aren't they filming these things? Can't a jury see this for themselves? I mean, you can kind of get a lot out of seeing tapes of people and what their demeanor is for yourselves. I'm just wondering.
I think right now with what we have of these characterizations of sociopathic and lack of empathy, and I think one of the allegations was that he had a high level of criminal activity. I don't know what any of those things actually mean. So
what does that mean? You have a high level of criminal activity. So are you a criminal or not? Like, are you a criminal or are you not a criminal? Okay. What do you mean high level of criminal activity? Does he have a history of crime? Like, Spit it out.
It's really going to come down to what are the details that support those things, right? What was the defendant saying? How was he saying it? Did he show any emotion about the loss of his wife under these horrible, horrific circumstances? Was there any indication of the loss that his children might be suffering? They have 2 young children together. Was there any awareness or concern about them in this process? And certainly if the defendant is demonstrating a lack of concern for any of those factors, then it is going to support the prosecution's theory that he was so cold-hearted that he could actually commit this crime. Because I think, an average person says, how could somebody do this to somebody? This is just beyond reality, much less the mother of your children.
Exactly. This is beyond reality. This is like, this takes a lot to do. I mean, this isn't like some, accident where somebody just got out of control in a split second and it, whacked somebody. You know what I mean? Like, this is like a lot. There's a lot of jealousy here, first of all. I believe jealousy is the root of almost all evil. When it comes to money, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to a lot of things. You be very careful with jealous people, okay?
And so the prosecution, I think, is going to have to sort of develop the defendant in a way that shows that he was capable of it, this lack of empathy, this lack of emotion, this, sociopathic tendencies or sadistic comments and remarks, those are all going to build the prosecution's case about how he could do this, how he could actually execute on such a horrible, horrific crime.
And we touched on this a bit earlier, but I kind of want to bring it back to this, the mental health component, all of it. You mentioned his state of mind during the crime, which is going to be very important. And it's kind of an underlying theme to all of this. I mean, this is not a natural crime by any stretch of the imagination. So automatically it gets us thinking, is this person mentally ill to have willingly committed these things? I know that you had said previously, we don't think that's really going to hold up, but
hold on. Let me ask you guys a question, okay? For somebody to do something like this, they're not crazy? They're not mentally ill? So are you telling me that a normal person could commit a crime like this? A normal person, a sane person? I just don't believe that. You have to be mentally ill to do this. In my opinion, who does this? This is like, it's not even explainable. You have to have absolutely no empathy at all. And a lot of these video games and things that these kids are watching and growing up on, this is what we're breeding. This is what we're breeding. Stabbings and all this stuff. We're breeding emotionless people. This is scary. Don't care about anybody.
If the defense does try to go this route, how would they go about that?
If the defense is seeking to base their defense in whole or in part on his inability to decide right from wrong in the moment, or they're going to say he had, voices in his head that he was compelled to do this, he thought he was saving her, he thought he was saving the children, we don't really know. But if it's some sort of allegation that his mental health was not right.
So I guess what she's saying is there's a difference between being insane and just being evil. Is that what I'm learning here? Is that if you know what you're doing, it's not insanity? Is that what that is? Because I don't know, like again, in Psycho, he knew what he was doing. He's still insane. I mean, I don't understand. So if you do these crimes and you're insane, you're not aware of it? How? Even if voices in your head, I mean, you're still aware of what the act is you're doing. It's just like these people that drive drunk. They're drunk, but they are aware that they did something wrong.
That caused him to do this, and that if he was in his right mind, he would have never done this. The defense is going to have to lay the groundwork for that. Usually what we see is a pattern of psychiatric treatment and care. Sometimes we see psychiatric hospitalizations. We hear about a history of significant trauma in the defendant's life that may lead to a split personality or a dissociative disorder where they disengage from their body, their mental side disengages from their body. They would need to present evidence that shows there's sort of been this pattern of mental health disorders. If there's a history.
Okay, I understand that. I do. I understand what she's saying. You know, bipolar, you know, split personality disorder, right? There's a switch, right? Okay, yes. But is that the only kind of insane people there are? So you're telling me that I just can't get past the point that you're not insane if you just murdered your wife and dismembered her. How are you not nuts? Something's not right. There's a chromosome missing there. A normal human being doesn't have the emotionlessness, okay, to actually do something like that. You couldn't even take it.
History of mental health disorders that have not been treated or diagnosed, the defense is going to have a much harder time selling that to a fact finder, because a fact finder, this crime, as you said, is just so not natural. Right? It's just not. This is just so beyond what typical domestic violence may look like. That it's going to be really hard for the defense to say, oh, he snapped in the moment. Life just became too much for him, and he just snapped. That's not going to work. The defense really needs to put forth something that a fact finder could hang their hat on and say, okay, he really truly was not in his right mind and did not understand what he was doing or was not in control of his own actions at that point. That's a tall order under the best of circumstances. It's going to be, I think, virtually impossible for the defense to be successful on that kind of theory in this case with these facts.
Now, I'm not saying that you committed a crime, okay, and you're insane, and because you're insane, you should get a lesser punishment. Oh, no. I'm not saying that at all. I believe that no matter what is going on, okay, crimes have to be treated equally. You understand? You murdered someone. Like, there should be no lenient punishment for chopping your wife up, strangling her, and then dismembering her and blending her in a blender, and then dissolving the rest of it in a solution. Okay, there's no lesser punishment here. So at some point it gets to the point where it's like, how much money of the taxpayers are you going to waste on this? The guy's got to go to jail for the rest of his life. That's it. End of conversation. It's not how many life sentences. It's done. You are in jail for life with no parole. Done.
Now, this happened way back in February. He was arrested then, and that's around the time that investigators determined the murder happened. But the reason we're talking about this case today is because just this week, he had appealed for release, but that was denied. And I know there are differences between United States law and Switzerland law, but...
Well, just a side note, they were saying that they realized that she was dead in February, and he killed her in January. It's like, where's her family? Where are her parents or like cousins or siblings or, you just disappear. Like this is, it seems to me too, like he had her isolated. You know what I mean? Which is jealousy. They get you away from your friends, get you away from your family. It's like this isolation. It's dangerous. It's not normal. Either side. There are women that do the same thing to men.
It did come down to a judge deciding we're either going to let him out or not, and that was denied. Do you think that was the right move?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The nature of the crime, the charges against him are so significant, so horrific. Assuming the standard in Switzerland is similar to here, is there a danger? Is there an existence of a danger factor to society, to other people around him? Is there a risk of flight? All of those factors are definitely present here. So absolutely the right decision to continue to hold him.
The couple shared 2 daughters together, and right now it's unclear who gained custody of the children after Thomas's arrest. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.
Okay. You want the model, you want this, stature, you want this thing in your mind. But do you really want that? Is that really what you want? See, a situation like this, the way I look at it is this. He wanted all that, so he thought, but he couldn't handle it. You have to know who you are. You have to know what your limitations are. He's clearly way too jealous of a person to be around somebody that is that, beautiful, that outgoing. Clearly, she was a pageant person. She must have personality. She's got this successful thing going for her. She's constantly on Instagram doing photo shoots. It takes a certain kind of person to handle that. Somebody that's not jealous, somebody that's confident. This is a complete disaster. And the warning signs were there. The warning signs were there. People are saying that they've seen him throwing her up against a wall. First of all, what kind of mother stays in a relationship like that? Because your kids are also at risk here. So, her not leaving a situation like that is also partly her blame. Is anybody thinking about the children here? Or are we all just thinking about ourselves? Crazy. Very sad story. Well, I'm curious to see how that trial ends. We'll definitely be back to this one. I'm DiBRAVA. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Crime and Culture Unfiltered. See you next time.